All right, well, on today's topic at Gerby MHS, today's topic, Punnett Squares. And we're working on packets, we're working on pages 2, and this is problems number 1 through 7. So, it says on your pages, the Punnett Square is a chart used by geneticists to help determine the chances of an offspring receiving a particular characteristic. The Punnett Square will not tell you how many offspring will develop or the order in which they will be born. So it doesn't tell me what order they're in, and it doesn't even tell me which one definitively you're going to get. Now, in this particular example, which is numbers 1 through 7 again, the example we have is big B, meaning the dominant trait is brown hair. So a big B symbolizes brown, whereas a little b equals blonde hair. Okay? So, what we have here for an example, it says we are going to take two heterozygous parents. So we are going to take big B, little b. Heterozygous meaning two alleles, one allele, two alleles, that are not the same from each other. Hetero, they're different. And so we're crossing a heterozygous organism with another heterozygous organism. Now first, if we looked at genotype, genotype is the letters, right? Genotype is the letters. So genotype, right? The letters. Phenotype is what does the organism actually look like, all right? So for this case, the genotype would be heterozygous, big B, little b. And what would this thing actually look like? Because it has a dominant, it would have brown hair. Okay, so that's phenotype versus genotype. So, big B, little b crossed with big B, little b. And so what would end up happening here is this. If we took this parent and we put this parent here, and we took this parent and put it across the top, here's what would happen. Remember, we talked about Mendel's laws, right? The law of segregation says 50% of the time a big B would go to an offspring, 50% of the time a little b. And likewise over here, 50% and 50%. So how we show that in a Punnett Square is we have 2 letters times 2 letters, don't we? So 2 times 2 gave us a 4 Punnett Square. And so for this organism right here, half the time this individual, let's say it's the male, is going to give a big B sperm. Okay? And for this one, we're going to have 50% of the time a little b sperm. Okay? Now, if we made this the female parent, okay, so this is the male, and this is the female, those are the symbols, right? So if we did that, we would have 50% of the time she's going to have an egg with big B, and this actually is not to scale, right? The egg is significantly larger than the sperm. And 50% of the time, egg, okay? So if we fill in this Punnett Square, what we get is this. We get a big B, we get a big B and a little b, we get a big B and a little b, and we get a little b and a little b. Now, if we were to look at genotypic ratio, okay? So, genotypic ratio, meaning what is the ratio of the letters? Well, what we would have is we would have 1 big B for every 2 big B, little b's for every 1 little b. Now, if we looked at this from a phenotypic ratio standpoint, however, here is what would happen. We would end up having a brown, a brown, a brown. Why? Dominant, dominant, dominant. And this would be the only blonde. And it's the only way we can get a blonde child because it is recessive. And so what would end up happening for phenotypic ratios, we would have 3 brown hair to 1 blonde hair. Okay? If I asked you to do that. Now, let's look at questions 1 through 7. Question number 1 says this. What are the chances of the offspring being homozygous brown-haired? So homozygous equals 2 alleles that are the same. Okay? And so what ends up happening here is we end up going over here and we look at our Punnett square. We need two alleles that are the same and it wants homozygous brown. So this organism would be brown, brown, and brown, but there's only one of these three that is the same, and that's a big B and a big B. Homozygous, two alleles that are the same. And so therefore, there is one offspring out of 1, 2, 3, 4 possible. And so what are the chances? It would be 1 out of 4. Or we could even put that in a percentage of 25%. Number 2, what are the chances of the offspring having blonde hair? Well, we already talked about this down here, didn't we? This is the only organism right here, this little b one, that could have blonde hair. The other ones would be brown, brown, and brown. So therefore, again, we have one offspring out of 1, 2, 3, 4 possible. So it's 1 out of 4, or again, 25%. I don't mind which way you express it. Number 3, what are the chances of the offspring being heterozygous brown-haired? Now, heterozygous means, so heterozygous, one dominant allele and one recessive. Okay? So what we're doing is we're looking for that situation. Well, this is homozygous, we already declared. And this is homozygous too. This is homozygous brown, homozygous blonde. It's the only way to be recessive. And so, if we look at this one, we have a big B and a little b, a big B and a little b. We have a dominant and a recessive, right? They don't match. Therefore, we have 1, 2 of them, 1, 2, out of 1, 2, 3, 4 total offspring. So here we'd have 2 over 4, or 50% of the offspring. Number 4, what is the genotypic ratio? Well, look at that. We already did it. It's right here. We have 1 big B for every 2 big B, little b, for every 1 little b, 1 little b. Number 5, what is the phenotypic ratio? Phenotype meaning what does it look like? All right, well, what we had here, as you can see at the bottom, is we had 3 organisms that would have brown hair if we had 4. All right, so 3 with brown hair for every 1 with blonde hair. Number 6, what is therefore the dominant gene? Well, we symbolize that with a capital B, and so the dominant gene was big B, which equaled brown. And number 7, here's our last question. Is there a heterozygous blonde? Well, in order to be blonde, you have to get 2 little b's, don't you? Little b equals blonde. So, is there a way for us to have a heterozygous blonde? And the answer is no. Okay? And the answer is no because it requires a little b to be blonde. The second you did heterozygous, you'd have a big B and a little b, and that organism phenotypically, right, would have brown hair because of the presence of a dominant big B. And that's numbers 1 through 7. All right, now we're going to attack numbers 8 through 13, or 8 through 19 on pages 2 and 3. So here we go. So number 8 says, if curly hair is dominant to straight hair, curly hair is dominant to straight, what letters would we use? Well, we always use the letter of the dominant trait. In this case, that's curly. So what we do is we set up big C to equal curly hair, and we set up little c to equal straight. Number 9 says then, if a heterozygous curly-haired male, so we have the male being heterozygous curly-haired, so we have a big C and a little c, meaning phenotype, this thing would look curly, but genotype, big C, little c. Let's see, what would the genotypes then look like? Marries a straight-haired female. Well, here is the female. Now, the female has straight hair. So the female has to have at least 1 little c to equal straight. But the reality is this organism has a phenotype of straight hair. And so must be little c, and here's why. The second a big C was present, then this female wouldn't have had straight hair. This female would have had curly hair. So it has to be a big C, little c crossed with a little c, little c. Number 10. Number 10 says, okay, so what are the gametes, right, for the male? Well, again, just like we talked about before, 50% and 50%, right? And so 50% of the time, the organism is going to have a sperm with a capital C in it, right? 50% of the time. And 50% of the time, a sperm with a little c, right? So this one, that one. Now the female's a little different. 50% of the time she's going to give a little c, and 50% of the time she's going to give a little c. So 100% of the time, the female is going to give a little c to an offspring, right? Little c and a little c. So therefore, number 12 says, all right, well, let's look at the Punnett square. Well, we have 1, 2 combinations times 1, 2 combinations. Therefore, our Punnett square would have 4 squares to it, 2 times 2. And so what we'll do is we'll put the male on the left side. The male, 50% of the time, a sperm with a big C, 50% of the time, a little c. The female, on the other hand, she is going to have little c and little c every single time. So what ends up happening here is if we do the matrix, we end up with big C, big C, little c. We end up with little c, and little c, little c. So we should be able to answer our questions pretty quickly now. Let's do it. Let's see, number 13. What are the chances of it being homozygous curly? Remember, curly was capital C. Homozygous means the 2 letters have to be the same. So we'd have to have a curly. Well, do we have any big C's? No, right? Therefore, the answer for number 13 is 0%. We have no chance of a big C. Number 14, what are the chances of the offspring having straight hair? Well, this offspring is going to have curly hair. This one will have curly, straight, and straight. And so what is the chances? 2 out of 4. 1, 2 out of 4. Or we could call that 50%. Number 15. What are the chances of it being a heterozygous curly? Well, this thing has 2 different letters, and they both be curly. So therefore, 1, 2 out of 4. That's 2 out of 4, or 50%. Number 16. What is the genotypic ratio? Genotype meaning the letters. So what would we have? Well, we'd have 2 big C, little c's for every 2 little c, little c's. If you want to make that 1-to-1, you can reduce it down. That's fine. Let's see, number 7. I always just leave it because I count 2 and I count 2. So that's why I leave it that way. 17, phenotypic ratio. What do they actually look like? Well, these 2 big C, little c's, they would have curly hair. So we'd end up with 2 curly. And what would these ones look like? They would be straight. So we'd have 2 curly for every 2 straight. Number 18. Number 18 says, so what is the dominant trait? Big C equaling curly. And number 19, again, asking us this question. Can you have a heterozygous straight? Well, the only way to be straight, right, is to have little c. So the answer, again, is no. And why is the answer no? Because the only possibility for straight hair would have to be little c. And the second you had a heterozygous, right, you'd have a big C, the thing would have curly hair. So therefore, no, not possible. I'd like you now to complete numbers 20 through 31 on your own. You should also now be able to complete page 4 and complete page 5. You will then use your Schoology account and the keys that are provided to you to check your work over.